The HX Collective explores the human experience through three main channels of life: work, relationships, and self. With raw, authentic conversations, the podcast investigates how challenges can become powerful teachers, leading to personal growth and deeper connections. Rooted in humanity-centered design, each episode reflects a commitment to doing good and doing well, featuring diverse voices and generational perspectives. Expect gripping stories of struggle and success with thought-provoking discussions and concrete tools and tactics that encourage you to rethink your relationship with distress, helping you to establish your full human experience. This is the HX Collective channel. Hello, friends, and welcome to the next episode of the HX Collective podcast. I can't tell you what a joy it is to get to do this work, to have these conversations with so many fantastic thought leaders that are united to our mission at the HX Collective, and that's the mission to elevate human flourishing. Today is particularly poignant, and our guest is going to bring a perspective that in many ways was one of the original catalysts for creating the HX Collective. And when you have a chance to learn from her today, you are going to connect the dots that having a sense of the human experience and focusing on human flourishing is in no way a soft skill, my friends. There is nothing soft about the priority and the importance of creating a leadership capacity to really accelerate and create great human experience, and to do that in a way that has the spillover benefit of a human being's fullness and being the best version of themselves in every lens that we talk about, which is in work, in relationships, and self. So without further ado, I can't wait to introduce you to my great friend, Jen Marr. She is the CEO of Showing Up. She is a 3-time book author. She is a completely badass mom of 3 adult daughters and a wonderful wife, and just contributor to her community. Her latest book, Lifting Up, it's the transforming power of supportive leadership. And when I tell you she is in a category of one in defining this particular capacity of leadership development, I know that you're going to learn from her wisdom today. You're going to want to walk away. You're probably going to want to take some notes. So get something to write with as you're listening, unless of course you're driving, and then that would not be a good choice. But I want you to have an opportunity to really learn from Jen today and to benefit from the decades of research that she's been doing in her space. So without further ado, Jen, thank you for saying yes. Welcome to the podcast. I know our audience is going to glean so much benefit, because while leadership is certainly a concept that we most often associate with the work lens, let's talk leadership is really it. We're leaders in every lens when we think about the relationships we have, and we think about our leadership when we look at our human flourishing with self. So before we get into our conversation, can you give our audience a little bit more on your background and how you got to this point of being the CEO of Showing Up and really authoring this latest book, Lifting Up?
Thank you, Deb. What fun it is. I love that you started this podcast. I love your journey of flourishing and looking into that. I think it is the topic of the next decade, and there's so much to it. And like you said, I have a little sliver of a specialty that is pretty additive to what most people are already looking at, because it's something I uncovered about 12 years ago. As you know, my background was business development. I worked overseas for a healthcare company. But when my 3 daughters were born, I pivoted to take a career break and ended up just getting involved in some crisis response work and seeing exactly how human behaviors in the face of distress, disruption, upheaval, change are completely different than they were even 2 decades ago. As life changes, so are humans. As work changes, so are humans. And so some of these predictable behaviors we had as humans 15 years ago just don't work anymore. And that is more and more true. So for the past 12 years, I've really dove into research into that space and have found that in the face of upheaval, disruption, uncertainty, we're getting our human behaviors wrong more than we're getting them right. And so that is really what I dove into. And as I moved more and more into it, realizing how critical it is that leaders understand this, because if everyone around us right now is in the thick of it, which I think we can agree most people are, if leaders aren't going to lead us through this, who is? And if leaders don't have the right skills to lead us through this, how can they
Yeah.
lead through it?
Jen, when we first met, I was at the space of a very big personal crisis with my oldest daughter, as you know, was struggling with adolescent mental health issues, and I was so stunned at how the world was interacting with me when I had this child who was in crisis, and I kept thinking, people are being unnecessarily injurious in their desire to be supportive, but they kept missing the mark. And so, if you would, I know that we've had a chance to connect before, but for this particular audience, could we start at that space of when the aha started for you? When you wrote your book prior to lifting up, you wrote the book Showing Up. But I remember thinking when I right before I met you, I was in this zone of I have to create I have to write a book and I have to create a training program for people to teach people how to be supportive of people when they're in crisis. And within weeks of being declarative in my head, we were introduced by a mutual friend here in Chicago. And it was like you answered a prayer. It was like, oh, I don't have to write a book or create a training program. You've already been doing that? And it was such a powerful moment, but for context, when you're talking about the human behaviors and we're talking about how, like, it's up to the leaders to get this right, can you give a little bit more of that context? Because I think it will set the stage for our audience to understand, like, you're not messing around. This isn't like a dabbler's mission, like, this is rooted in real social science and rooted in real lived experience. Can you tell some stories?
Well, absolutely. I will go back, yeah, 13 years ago, actually. In my career break that I spoke about, I was brought in to help in the aftermath of the Sandy Hook Elementary shooting. And this happened in December of 2014. I was brought in as a support. I had a group of people. We were bringing in support dogs, beautiful comfort dogs, and really spending time with teachers, staff, parents, students, helping students reconnect with their brain to get back to their work. But during that point, I really got to know people. And it was only 4 months after that that I had happened to be 700 yards away from the finish line of the Boston Marathon when the bombs exploded. So it put me in this really unique situation for the next 5 years of one, having been one in need of support. Took me 2 hours to find my family at that marathon, but also one giving support and understanding how to accept support. It becomes this whole triangle of how do we give, how do we ask, and how do we accept. And the more I worked with the families at Sandy Hook and the more I understood what it's like to understand trauma and what happens to the human body when you're going through it, I realized how injurious so many of the behaviors are, of how people feel like they're supporting someone in the aftermath of, at this case, tragedy, but end up making the situation worse. And so for 12 years, that led, being in that environment, I was asked to do a study because what we were doing in the school with those dogs and with some other programming we were doing just to get people together caught the eye of some researchers. And so it led to ultimately 4 research studies that really dove into not just emotion-based training, not random acts of kindness, but those hard human behaviors that really happen in what we call the awkward zone. And so the awkward zone became kind of the pinnacle of our research, and not just understanding what we think we should do, but more importantly, understanding our mindsets, habits, and behaviors that are stopping us from actually making the impact that we think we're having, but we're actually not.
That revelation of the awkward zone, and I will dig in it a bit in terms of how supportive leadership and the strategies in creating high performing cultures, you can't get to high performance without navigating the awkward zone. So we're gonna talk more about what that looks like, I know, in a minute. But that was such a poignant consideration, when we first met, and, another piece that really caught me is that, in your research, you talk a lot about how people feel empathy, but we don't necessarily know how to do empathy. As we think about the lead up to lifting up, can you talk a little bit about what your research has told you about this idea of feeling something but not knowing what to do to act on it?
It's interesting because, well, first of all, I was in a situation where everybody had empathy and compassion. Let's just start with that. You're, seeing 21st graders lose their lives. There was not a person in the world that didn't want to help. Empathy and compassion were in huge doses. but people didn't act on it right. So it opened my eyes to how do emotions really dictate our behaviors. And I started studying the emotions of empathy and compassion, and there's sympathy, and then there's apathy. There's all sorts of these emotions that kind of go into our relationships with each other when we're faced with hardship. And let's call a spade a spade. Empathy and compassion are nouns. They are feelings. And so I think, and not only that, most people think they have them, right? So when we're out in the world today, and I hear a lot about, empathy is the biggest leadership skill, I will not say empathy is not a critical leadership trait, but it's not a skill. It's a feeling. And so in order to help someone, you need an action, you need a verb. And so feelings are good, especially when we look inward. But when you are a leader or when you are face to face with someone that needs support, it's not, you shouldn't be focused on what you're feeling inside. You should be focused on the skill you need to effectively support someone. And that becomes almost emotionless. Really, what I have really learned and trained people to do is when you're in the thick of it, sometimes your emotions are not good indicators of what skill you should use. So we have to train skills of support as black and white as any other skill in the handbook, because you might be having your worst day and you still need to know what to do to someone that's having an equally bad day. So emotions are great. And I'm not one here to say that EQ is not important, but EQ is training us to look inward and leadership is acting outward. So we need to go beyond EQ to know how to really effectively lead people through challenging times.
Every time I get to have a conversation with you, I think I've learned the things I need to learn from you. And then another aha goes off. The distinction of traits versus skills. I think that's a great segue to talk about what it means and really kind of the definition in the thesis of supportive leadership. But I just, that's so true. It's like the EQ piece is essential, but it's the doing on it. It's the acting upon it. It's the skill access when we're exercising the traits of empathy or compassion or validation or whatever those things may be. So I'm eager for you to set the stage for us. So when the lead up in creating the book and now recognizing you've created this sort of lane or domain of thinking known as supportive leadership. How do you define supportive leadership and how might that be distinct or different? When I think about traditional leadership models, certainly one that has been very popular in recent past is like the servant leadership model. So give us a sense of what is supportive leadership and how is it distinct perhaps from other models?
Well, when we think of traditional leadership, we think of leadership in a time of stability. We think of leadership in a time where things were pretty predictable. Things followed a certain pattern. Life was pretty much the same. And the thing I think, in order to understand supportive leadership, we have to understand the core premise that the world has changed, that humans are feeling incredibly high rates of anxiety, distress, disruption, upheaval, change, exhaustion, and burnout. The way that the world is working and changing is bringing such disruption into the way we work. Every week, it's a new system being put in. Every day, it's a new AI app that's coming out. And disruption, uncertainty, everything is ultimately human disruption, human uncertainty. And so we can put all the systems in the world, but it's going to just have this negative cascading impact on the humans. When I compare supportive leadership to traditional leadership or even servant leadership, to me, supportive leadership is the operating system for servant leadership. At some point in time, one is more of a mindset, another one is what are the skills and how are we going to measure that? How are we going to make it sustainable? How can we embed it into our core processes to make sure that we are treating these pragmatic skills and putting them at the hands of all of the leaders on our team in order to grow the culture. And so I would therefore describe supportive leadership as this new needed element of understanding core human needs and the leadership that needs to address those core human needs that used to, in the old traditional workplace, maybe be considered personal problems because everything meshes together now. everything. You can't go home without reading emails, and you can't do your work without getting texts from your parents or children. It's everything is together, and everything is woven together into this new, complex, ambiguous, we know the term VUCA world. And so we have to have a leadership operating system within that to be able to have those foundational human needs met, that we can deal with this rapid rate of change and disruption.
I love you describing this construct as an operating system because it gives me hope for myself as a leader and for the leaders that you're impacting, that it is actually a skill set that can be taught. So this isn't something that is sort of distinctive or you got to be born with it. There's an element of predictability, of having a capacity to act and to exercise skills in the face of what feels like human mess and disruption and anxiety and all the things that are occurring. So there's a lot of hopefulness. From your vantage point though, where when you think, I know leaders are well intended and they certainly want to say and do the right things and they certainly want to show a level of care when our personal and professional lives are so meshed as you've described. Why do you think so many well-intentioned leaders are struggling to lead supportively?
Well, I think I can set the framework for this with the breakdown. Every group we work with, we survey and we gather data from. And over the course of the last 5 years, this kind of set of relational dilemmas have kind of been uncovered as to why this happens, right? And so to understand first, you ask most leaders, just as I said, we call it the 580%, by the way. Like all of these are about 80% of the time within 15 points one way or the other. But the first question is, can you tell when someone's struggling? And 80 to 100% of people, yeah, I can see that. I can tell because we are compassionate people. Again, which is why sometimes when you say, like, we have to train empathy, we have to train compassion, it falls flat because people feel like they have it. And because humans, we're compassionate beings. So get that out of the way. People consider themselves empathic and compassionate. And that's great. Secondly, the thing that we uncovered is what is some of the things that you're struggling with the most in the workplace? And that 80% is no one has any idea. No one sees me. Like no one has a clue what I'm dealing with. So 80%, yeah, I can see you, but 80% like I'm off in my own problem world that no one has any idea. We ask those people, do you tell people about it? No, because us as humans, we're like, I'm just going to push through. That's what we've been taught. And then we ask, do you wish you could? And yeah, we do as humans need to process things with other people. And so in the last 80% is, but I have no idea how to handle that. So we're kind of in this human relational dilemma that we feel we're compassionate, but yet we are not acting in such a way. So our intent is so, and our impact is such a gap. And it's kind of explained through what we would call the Dunning-Kruger theory, which is it's like a cognitive bias. Like it's impossible for our minds to grasp that if we consider ourselves compassionate or empathetic, that therefore our actions aren't being reflected that way. But yet we all know it. If you know someone struggling, you know that there are times that you're like, not my business, not my place, wasn't trained for that. Someone else can do that. I don't have time. I'm just going to stick to business. And so when we really start to dive into that awkward zone of the habits, mindsets, and behaviors that stop us from bridging that gap, it's all things that can be addressed and understood when we really start diving into it.
I love that there is a bridge. So there is a way, there's a sense that, when we're encountering this sort of dichotomy of we think we can see people struggling, we don't actually, feel like people can see us. And then when these things arise, we just have this sort of tension within ourselves, like, I don't want to say the wrong thing. I'm not going to say, and we get stuck. And the idea that we can move past that, I think is really encouraging. And so can you give us a sense about some of the ingredients when you think about skills that can be taught that help you navigate and bridge that gap? What are some examples so we can, get a more practical sense of when we think supportive leadership, what does that look like then in a skill base?
There's one more layer needs to be put in before we get to that skill, which is what that the leaders really understand that there are clear boundaries, right? Like there are clear boundaries between what I as a leader should be doing, what HR should be doing, what they should be doing for themselves, and what a professional coach, therapist, counselor should do. And I think up until this point, leaders have not played a role in that. If you look at most organizations' EAP or the things that they work on the employee caring for themselves or go to HR for the EAP. And both of those things put the one that is in the thick of it, the one that is exhausted and burnt out, needing to initiate all these things themselves. And that is why it's not getting better. Leadership now has gotten kind of a free pass, whereas it should be the most critical element of moving team performance, team alignment, team health forward, because the leader is the person that's there every day. And many are not, they don't have it in them to do all that reaching out between getting therapists and coaches and go to my resilience class and whatever else they're having to do.
I'm so glad you interjected that because I think this is before have you answered the skill question. You've also, I know one of the analogies that you've given me visually that has really helped me put what you just said in perspective is the concept of the barbell. Can you share? Because I think, yeah, that's what I mean, what you're describing, but will you kind of illustrate what you just said, but giving it in that visual? Because I do think whoever's listening right now, I mean, if you may have a formal leadership role, and what Jen's describing is gonna land for you in a way where you're starting to think about you as a supervisor of people. But all of you, if you don't have that type of formal leadership role, you are leading things that include people in your life, wherever you are in your life. So let's talk about this concept of that responsibility on that self. What is the barbell?
Yeah. So we like to talk about it as the barbell of care. And there's pretty much three elements that we need to be aware of if someone needs support care. And if you consider a barbell, two heavy ends on either end and then a handle in the middle. And so the two ends are areas that traditionally have been really focused on these last couple decades, which is excellent. One end of the barbell would be our clinical care, which is professional people, transaction based, fee based way of getting care from someone trained in a specialty. On the other end of the barbell is self-care. And those are all our inner. I'm describing self-care as inner work, right? That's really understanding your emotions. It's understanding what do I need to do to eat better? What do I need to do to get better sleep? Also very important. So these two things, if you think about it over the last 2 decades, there's been enormous amounts of resources put towards that, to the point that I think if you ask any Gen Zer today, they will say, yeah, I can regulate my emotions. I know how to breathe. And if I have problems, I'll go see a therapist. The issue with that is it doesn't work. Think about if you broke your ankle, you would go to see the doctor, one end of the barbell, get it cast. You would go and to physical therapy to rehab it, your own self care. But if that was all there was, if no one was there to open the door for you or ask, like, hey, how's your ankle? You would not heal as quickly. You would probably get depressed because no one sees you. It is the same in our workplaces. We have to recognize that the worker has things they need to care for themselves about, that there is the organization's EAP that can be accessed for any type of clinical care they need. But the hand that holds the barbell is where we live every day with those people all around us that say, I got your back. You're not in this alone. I'm going to guide you through this. I'm here to help you. I'm here to support you. I'm not going to solve the problem for you. I'm not a therapist, or I'm going to guide you through it. And a supportive leader is a guide that knows how to pull people through hardship using the whole barbell, knowing how to do the right connections to the right people in the right way to help this person. And if you think anybody out there considers how they got to where they are today, there's always one or two people that believed in them, that helped them through a really difficult time to get them through where they are. And those are the kind of leaders we need right now. And that's what I'm talking about.
Okay, that makes so much sense, and again, you've given me the barbell analogy before, and now I heard it in a really fresh way, and when you're saying, if you just focus on the 2 things, when you say, it doesn't work, I think what you're saying is it's incomplete, it's insufficient when it comes to creating, true connection, and that sort of barbell in the middle, that handle in the middle is what's happening in the workplace, and what a critical role leaders can play, in that space and being that bridge of care. So Now that we've got that, visual and the metaphor, talk about what are some of the skills? What are the ingredients of action as a supportive leader?
So we kind of break it down into 3 areas when we do training. We first dive into the awkward zone, and that is really helping people to identify their own personal blind spots and also to recognize and start naming this common language because, we talked about there, it's like a foursquare. And these are all our habits, mindsets, and behaviors that get us off track. We're thinking we're being good, impactful people, but we're really not. And it starts with first our mindset barriers. Those would be the top 2 squares in the foursquare. We're either overthinking or underthinking. And so we talk ourselves out of doing anything. And this happens a lot in our organizations today. One is more fear based, that we would be calling the doubter, that's overthinking things. The doubter will say things like, I don't know. I don't think it's my place. I'm afraid I'll make it worse if I do anything. I don't know if I'm the right person. I don't think it's the right time. Like kind of fearful, doubting, awkward, right? Intentions are there, but not really knowing exactly what to do. The other side, also alive and well in our organizations, is the deflector. And the deflector I like to think of as water flying off a Teflon pan, right? Like not even absorbing in you. Like, not my business, not my place. I've got my own problems. Like, I don't have time for that. Someone else can handle that. Like, not even letting it in, like, not even on the radar. And there's a lot of that. And then the 2 squares on the bottom are when we're actually with people face to face. It's how we respond when we see people. And so many things happen. So many misunderstandings happen when leaders are working with people going through a difficult time and just quick throwing out, do this, try that, do this, do that, and see you tomorrow. And the leader not taking time to really understand the impact of this employee's issue and just throwing out solutions that may not even be the right ones. So that we would call the fixer. And then we have the avoider, the one that is face to face. I know you, Deb, you're going through this really tough situation. And you know what? I'm not even going to bring it up. I'm just going to stick to the agenda items and just deal with work today. And all of those situations is why 80% of people will say, no one gets what I'm dealing with because we doubt, we deflect, we fix, or we avoid. And all of them. And the buckets will be different based on whoever it is. You know how like your dynamics with different people. Some people you get along really well with and you can talk really well, other people you can't. So we're all going to fall into one of them. It's not like a psychometric survey like, Deb, did you know you're a doubting avoider? It's not like that at all. It's just some days you're going to deflect, other days you're going to be a fixer. And so the point of it is we train people to, I'm trying to be a fixer here. Like if we can make ourselves aware of not only our habits, mindsets, and behaviors of giving support, but seeking it, because that is just as dangerous. Just as dangerous when we say, well, I just got to push through. And the top barriers for people asking for support are, I don't want to be a burden. I don't even know if my feelings are valid, and I should be able to handle this on my own. All 3 of those, which account for so many reasons why people don't seek support, are all not okay. Like, no, you're not a burden. I'm your leader. I should be supporting you through this. And you should be welcome to come to me. You shouldn't handle this alone. And whatever you're feeling is valid. Like, done. Like, get 80% of those barriers out of the way. So we have to understand the relational dilemmas that are happening and understanding that they're going to be different by each person and getting leaders and people in a place that it's just something they think about when they get in that awkward spot and can start naming it. Outside of that, then we move into micro moment skills. And then we have all of supportive conversation frameworks where we really help people tee up difficult conversations, both for seeking support and giving support.
I love that. So, and kind of thinking about self-awareness, like that's why I love that. I think the awkward zone was so compelling when you first introduced that to me in your research, and how powerful it is, not only as the person who's offering the support or would be the giver, but I love that you've also in this book help people recognize it's also in the seeking support, so that the 2 things working hand in hand. Again, for our audience, that micro moments, having this scenario, we often think that, supportive conversations are gonna take like, that it's gonna be so distracting to productivity and we're not gonna get any work done, and it's all and so there's again, whatever you're doing. Again, you're doubting or you're deflecting, or avoiding all of that. I think, again, getting through that mindset piece then allows you to see that micro moments for leadership bright spots is possible. And then I love that you actually give some very practical, like, language. I think sometimes leaders, we just don't know. We just need a little starter dough of, like, what's the turn of phrase, or what's the prompter, at least to help me get the conversation started or to ask the right questions. And so I think it's good for our audience to know that that concreteness is a big part of the lifting up frameworks and really what it means to have supportive leadership in place. As I think about culture and so much of elevating the human experience, and particularly through the lens of work, creating that experience of, where human flourishing is possible. One of the research insights you had shared with me years ago is about what a significant role work is playing relative to support and engagement that is distinct from maybe historical scenarios where people had, a sense of community with family or neighborhood, or they had an affiliation with, a spiritual affiliation, or they had a stronger connection with friends. It's like the work circle is not an even circle. It's so big on a relative basis. Can you, and why this is, like, again, this is not a nice to have. It's like, leaders, we have to wake up and understand the role that work is playing in the lives of people. Tell us a little bit about the context so we can talk about why this supportive leadership transforms cultures. It, like, changes the game. And when you've got something this big, we can't afford not to be paying attention. Give a little of that context. I think that was eye opening to me.
Yeah, and it's I also wanna bring into this as well, when we look at the shifts and the trends and, you brought up how if you think back to 50 years ago, how people lived is so different. I think back to my grandparents, who never left the area where they grew up because they didn't even really have, or their grandparents, they couldn't move anywhere. They literally, as far as the horse could go. Changes happened so fast. And so when you look at generation, from my grandparents to my parents, they could move farther away with a car. Then the next generation came, they could fly away with the plane. And now people are all over the place. Communities are very much more fragmented, not as strong. So, the traditional workplace had these strong community bonds. Religion was much more important. People came to the same worship places every weekend. And everything now is just kind of dissipated into so many different directions. And with the rise of technology and all of that, not only has it changed the trends of how people work, but it also is one of the key things we have to understand and why we need supportive leaders is the generational differences. And when we look now at the native digital generations that grew up with screens in their hand compared to the native analogs who still grew up without screens in their hand and understand the human experience far deeper than the native digitals, it kind of becomes a moral imperative that we have to raise this generation up because as AI comes and takes over so much of the task driven world, the human nature of what we need is going to be so critical. And yet, this native digital generation is dealing with high levels of loneliness, of social anxiety, of isolation, of a real low level of networking skills, even though they want it. And we have to raise them up. This is one of the best generations when it comes to innovation and compassion, but they don't have the human skills. And I focus a lot on that in my book because I watched it in my own family. And I know, Deb, you have done it as well. But understanding, we call it generational intelligence. We have to have that and we have to know how to harness the strengths of both. But because the world has been so fragmented in all those ends, the one place where people are gathering, like 50 years ago, you went to school and you went to work and then you went back to your home. Now you go to work or you go to school to do everything, to make friends, and so it's completely changing. We find in some organizations, 40% of people in that organization don't have a support system outside of work. And so if they're not going to feel part of something at work and have someone pull them out of that and help show them a brighter future, who's going to do it?
That needs to sink in. That bears repeating. 40% of people report they don't have a support system outside of work.
The lowest we've seen was 18%. Highest is almost 38%.
It would be nice to ignore that, right? Just to say, well, shake, too bad for them, not my problem, right? So That's really, really compelling to consider. And if that so the practical implications when we start to get into conversations with leaders about productivity and revenue and profitability and quality and customer service, like, when you're starting to think about human beings, when the workplace is the place and they're not having needs met in the totality of their life and they're not operating with that sense of full support, all of those metrics that are impacted by humans, particularly the relationship-based metrics like customer service, ooh, right? So when you think about then, if, when a person acknowledges, they agree that, "Okay, I'm gonna build capacity for this. I'm gonna accept the hard reality, even if it's not my reality because 'cause I'm a native analog. I'm gonna accept that I'm surrounded by a generation and workforce that is requiring a different kind of leadership model." And when you think about, if I accept this and I choose to build these skills, like, what can I anticipate is gonna happen when it comes to culture and to trust? Like, what are the outcomes that I could achieve or experience if I were to be good at supportive leadership?
Well, the outcomes that we see is, first of all, people are from the outset, they're like, we don't have time for another training. We don't have one more thing we have to do. But what people don't understand is how much time is wasted by not having these conversations and by not addressing these pain points, which are all organizational pain points. If you look at the key organizational pain points we have right now, whether it's look of lack of trust, lack of communication, turnover, retention, name whatever they are, all sorts of them, career advancement opportunities, all of those pain points will require really solid conversations to pull people through it, right? And so if you are not having those conversations, if you're trying just to be the fixer, if you're trying to avoid it, it's just going to grow. And so what we find is when we give people the capacity and the agency to be able to say, sit down with someone and very confidently be able to ask the right questions, give the right answers, map out the right support, all of a sudden time is saved. Teams are better aligned, and when teams are better aligned, and not only that, I'll tell you what really happens is communication gets better. Because what's happening right now, people are feeling very out of the loop because so much of our communication's been taken over by technology, right? And when communication's taken over by technology, we all get emails all the time and you're like, that is not the same as me sitting down with you and saying, this is what's going on. This is what we got going this week. What's on your plate? What do you need help with? Let's get this done. So when we institute, one of our key skills is the fast and frequent one-on-one. Like, get rid of the old agenda driven once a month long sit down. What we now need are really fast and frequent check-ins and also the frameworks around those, right? If you've got an employee in the thick of it, we train the capacity and demand, knowing how to help your employee. When someone's in the thick of it, their brain is flooded with cortisol, so they can't think clearly. They can't prioritize. Everything just feels like an overwhelming load of work that they can't figure out what to tackle first. And a good leader will say, okay, here are the three things you're going to tackle today. Put those other things aside. I'll get someone to grab this and we'll take another look at it tomorrow. Giving someone permission just to do these two things so that everything else goes off the plate. That is a huge relief for someone under enormous pressure. And these skills don't take time. But what happens when you sit down and do these things? Your relationship grows. When your relationship grows, people don't want to leave. And then your team relationship gets better. So you become more innovative. You become far more productive because people are much more enjoying being at work. There's less fear. There's a lot more trust. There's a lot more feeling of safety. And there's a lot more hope because if you have a good relationship with your boss, you trust that they have your back. So those are all things that happen from the right relationships. And I think most leaders feel like they're good leaders. But when you really sit down and look at those pain points, that's what we do when we train is we first get everybody together, like, let's agree on what your organizational pain points are. And then break those down to the conversations that have to be had and collaborate on how those conversations should go. That's how you tackle it. And that's how you save time. That's how you have better relationships. And that's how you have a healthy and productive team.
I love that. And I love that you again, just the supplanting of the classic traditional leadership model of the sit down one-on-ones to fast and frequent one-on-ones. I love that particular technique and have deployed it, and it is amazing. It actually does save time. It doesn't elongate things. It doesn't make it more difficult. It actually, again, fuels more momentum. I'm imagining there's someone listening right now that's feeling a little skeptical and perhaps may have a sense that if you add supportive care into the workplace that you're lowering the standards. What are you saying to the skeptics that might be listening to our podcast today?
Well, a supportive leader holds the standards, right? Ultimately, think of this. What's a football coach? A football coach has to develop a game plan. They have to put the right players in place to do it. And the football coach or whatever sport coach will say, hey, it's on me to have the right game plan. I have to know what players to put in if I have somebody injured. I have to be accountable first. And then I will be accountable. I will make these players accountable because we're all playing to win a game. And if they're not, then they are either injured or ultimately a different player will come in and do that. But it's up to me to make sure people are healthy. And if they have a hurt ankle and they're on the injured reserve, I have to have a backup to come in. But it's up to the leader to be accountable first. And ultimately, it's up to the leader to develop and win that game plan. And so he has to make his people accountable. And he makes them accountable by making sure that they are able to do the best work they can. And if they can't, and he's done everything they can, then that's the end of the line. But how can a leader ask an employee to be accountable when he's not accountable first to the employee? So supportive leadership is actually the level set that forces accountability because they're spending so much more time with that one-on-one. All right, we talked about this last week. Now what can we do? What did you do about that? All right, what else can you do? Well, we talked about that. Why didn't you do that? Like the leader's not pushing the solution. He's training the employee to do it on their own, to be accountable to him, but also in a supportive way.
Yeah, I think it's a really good way to shift your mindset about even the word support. Like support isn't a construct of soft. And I think the analogy of a football coach, if you're a skeptic and you're listening, I think there is a really good sense that that really is, for the greatest coaches that have the winningest records, build cultures that have supportive leadership embedded. That level of care is a part of the game plan so that the game plan can be executed. So point for supportive leadership. Well, as we wrap up our time and I, again, this conversation, like we're gonna have more than one conversation on this. I think about this just not only through the lens of the workplace, but really thinking about supportive leadership that extends to all of the human experience. And when we look at it, not only through the lens of work, but when we think about our families, we think about our communities, relationships, even when we think about it for ourselves, what are some of the things that a person could anticipate if they were to work and build this type of leadership skill? How does that positively affect the human experience in other aspects of our lives?
Well, I love, the way humans are wired is we are wired relationally, right? Like if you just think for a second of a dog. Like, I don't know, I love dogs and I know a lot of people, they're wired relationally just like we are. So our internal wiring is very similar. But the dog has a brain of a 2 to 3 year old. Like they're all heart, they're not all brain. Humans become all brains, they kind of lose their heart. So if you look at a dog is not a solo dog. A dog is only happy around other dogs and other people. If you come in the door, they run to see you because we are wired to do life together. And when we support others, that comes right back to us reciprocally. Whenever we do something to help someone, we feel so much better about ourselves. And that is in our human DNA. And sometimes I think when we look at the world of loneliness and isolation, it's because we are all trying to do too much on our own. We're so busy that spending time with people I don't have time. One of the biggest issues right now in the workplaces is that leaders don't have time for the people they work with. It is the biggest issue, actually. And that is what that's all about. We are picking tasks over people because we're so busy. And it's nobody's fault other than this VUCA world we're in. But when we can flip that and help people it helps us far more than getting a big project done because it develops relationships which are so core to our fulfillment. And it also absolutely brings about more effective work, less people call in sick when they're burnt out at a very high rate. I think the statistics like 63 or 70% more. And so you have far less people calling in sick because they feel like they have a place to go. It's the same. If you feel supported and cared for at home, you're much more happy at home. It's just the human DNA. And we need a little bit more of that in our organizations as AI will take over all of the tasks.
So, one of my favorite ways to conclude podcast conversations is to really bring some practicalities and some wise counsel. And so, if you were to think about 3 actions that you would recommend our listeners take away that could be accessed within the next 30 days, what are some of the things that you would guide us if we want to move in a positive direction, turning our empathy into doing empathy, not being empathy and alone, and really move the needle as a supportive leader?
All right. So the first thing I would recommend is really just what I would call look, see, remember. And that is just look at the people you lead differently every day. Just look and ask them one question of something outside of work each week. Just be curious and remember that. That's number one, not difficult. Number two are the 210 skills, we call it. And that is number one, when you walk in the door, don't be on your screen, or whenever you're around people, put your screen down and look them in the eye and smile. And if you know their name, say it. It is crazy how easy that is to not do. And I had one person in an organization I worked with that realized, yeah, I was listening to a podcast until I got to my desk. And all of a sudden, I take my earphones off now before I walk in the door. And it's amazing the conversations I have between walking in the door and getting to my desk. That's one. 10. The other 10 is to view everyone you interact with that they have a 10 on their head. Like that is their potential. They have the potential of a 10. They might just be having a bad day. And not let people irritate you so much. So that would be the two. And then my third thing is just it doesn't have to be complicated. Just start fast and frequent check-ins with the people you lead. We have a framework for it. We train it, but honestly, you know how to have a fast and frequent check-in.
I love it. Well, I want our audience to know how they can find your book. And I've recently heard from you today that it's on audiobook. So can you show us the book so everyone can see it?
Oh, of course. Let's see. So here is the new audiobook. I haven't even released that yet. I actually told people, and here's the book. It also comes in hardcover. It comes in ebook, and super excited about it. In the back of this book is a whole playbook. All the things we talked about, it's all written out. And so, yeah, the last whole part gives you tips and tools and strategies and all sorts of different ideas to how to get through this world and lead people into a better place.
I love that. So, all of this information we will include in the show notes. And, friends, let me just encourage you. Yeah, this is a meaningful moment in time to change the game in human experience, wherever you may be engaging and leading people. And let me encourage you, adopt this mindset and this action set of what it means to lift up and to see the transformative impact of where supportive leadership is going to be the ultimate game changer. This is not optional, friends. Based on the research that Jen has shared with us today, we have to have a real acceptance that we're operating in a VUCA world, as Jen has said. And we may not like having to build new skills or just shift our focus or to care about the things that we used to say, oh, well, that's personal, that's outside of work. We are living in a deeply integrated time. And what an awesome opportunity for us to see our humans all having 10s on their forehead. Jen, thanks for this great conversation. I can't wait to pick it up again. I appreciate you, and friends, go get her book. We'll see you soon. Thanks for being here. If today's conversation sparked something in you, we hope you'll carry it forward with curiosity, compassion, and courage. Subscribe to the show, leave a review, and share this episode with someone who needs it. Until next time, keep exploring what it means to be fully human.